So here we are, guys. Thank you for another taking conversation with them. Today we've got the wonderful Joe Wilkie, who will talk to us about all things resilience and no doubt a lot of other things. What I want to do is just as I normally do, just let Joe introduce herself and what she does, and then she can give us the whole background to where she's been, what she's done, how she helps people, all the wonderful stuff that she does. So over to you, Joe.
Good morning, everybody. Well, today, really, I wanted to introduce you to the whole concept of resilience, what it means. Now, I have seen in the newspapers a lot recently in the UK that people are using the word a lot. So I think people have a general sense of what the word means. But when you start to study it, you realize that it's almost like a philosophy about life. And in the time that we're living, it's never been more important. So I usually start off with a few definitions, a few concepts that relate. And then I like to talk about what people think it means to them personally, because there really isn't any right or wrong. How you build your own resilience, how you promote it in other people, because resilience is holistic. It is everywhere. The name actually comes from Latin to describe metal. Now, any engineers or scientists know that metal goes back from liquid to reform. And resilience there's a lot of metaphors and a lot of expressions that we use in day-to-day life. Two that I will think of straight away would be what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, keep calm and carry on. So many memes that you see on Facebook are probably talking about resilience. But it's once you start to really understand it, you start to see it and recognize it everywhere, in yourself, in your friends, in your colleagues, in your family. And that's when you start to realize what it really means. Now, resilience exists in every culture, in every religion. And it's really, when I'm talking about it, I'm talking about it in psychosocial terms. If you Google the word, you will find a lot of people talking about it in other areas, more scientific, geographic. You can talk about resilient cities. There's a whole area where they're talking about resilient cities, and actually Barcelona is on the list. But the work that I do is psychosocial. Now, mindfulness, which is another thing everyone's talking about right now, fits in to the resilience model. It's one part of it, if you like. We could call that bit the introspection, personal resilience. But really, resilience is not just about you. It's about the dynamic interaction that you have with your world. Yeah. And so for everybody, that is different. So I think what we're seeing, hello, Joe. Is that Joe?
Yeah.
I'm just saying quick hello. And hello, Rosemary. Not sure you've got your camera working. I'm just talking I'm just introducing a little bit about what resilience is and talking about the concept. From your background, Joe, you probably touched on it already. I know that we've got one person here working in coaching and mentoring. So obviously it's very relevant to that field too. What I was saying, Joe, as you were joining, is that personal resilience is about you, but it's also, importantly, it's about your interaction with your world, which includes other people, obviously, and everything else, which could be your natural world. Obviously your colleagues, obviously your family, obviously your community. And it's thinking about all those connections that you have and working with them. Joe, I listened to your video conference and you talked a lot about growth, the growth mindset. That sits absolutely within the resilience model, positive growth.
Brilliant.
So, yeah, my background is occupational psychology, is HR. But then I spent 10 years working in Latin America in more development and educational work.
Right.
And it wasn't until I came back to Europe that I discovered resilience and thought, wow, this has got all the good things. So when we got onto doing the bit about organizations, which will probably be interesting to quite a lot of you, it seemed to me to include a lot of the good things, which I did enjoy doing. Because obviously psychology is a huge field. And I think today we get told by people that we have to be this and we have to be this and, oh, check out this, check out that. And it's overwhelming. And what I can tell you about resilience is that you can apply it to everything. And that for me is what makes it so valuable. Also, in my life as a psychologist, what I found is that there was psychology for rich people and psychology for poor people. And I thought, why? That doesn't make sense. So I think I'm in the group of people that thinks that psychology should be for everybody. And I think that we learn a lot from people who have dealt with more adversity in their lives than we have. So, for example, what we're seeing right now, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, with the present crisis, is that we're seeing a multitude of reactions, depending on how much resilience people have, how much adversity they've already passed through in their lives, and how much they can rely on knowing what personally works for them. And resilience does focus on the individual and the personal, but not in the same way as we've been taught for many years. Now, I would say that's because a lot of psychology started to come out of Harvard Business School.
Right.
And that really is showing one model. And I think what resilience does is it pushes it out of that model and it makes it universal. For example, if I'm working with a community leader in Honduras, in an area where they hardly have any food and they're looking for initiatives, do you think that the way I coach him would be different to the way I would coach a CEO?
I would have thought so. I would have thought there would have been some differences around the way, probably around the context of how you approach the coaching as well, because they come from a different baseline. I would have thought, Joe. Do you know what I mean?
I think, yeah, the context, of course, is always a vital thing. You've always got to pop people into their context. But if you get beyond that, you can see that there are similarities, the challenges that community leader is going through. The CEO, even though he looks very different, is probably going through very similar challenges. And you're right, Joe, we've got to put that into a context. But really, the psychology is the same. So resilience for many years was stuck in the area of children, teenagers, and development and disasters. Why? Because it works.
Yeah.
You know, and when you have a disaster, which is what we're dealing with right now, which for many people it's the first time they've gone through anything like this,
Right.
you have to react. Yeah. And you have to be conscious that everybody is reacting in different ways.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we all have things that are human.
Yeah.
So also, you can see what's going out on social media right now. I'm sure you're all getting a lot of advice from people, a lot of comments, and there's been a lot of tension. I don't know if any of you have felt that. A lot of tension because people are digging for their resilience in different ways. And some people, their resilience is already there because they've had to dig so much. For example, my refugees, my homeless that I work with. Now, I sat in on a CIPD video conference a couple of days ago. Now, this video conference was pitched at people really in salaried, safe jobs.
Right.
But these people are experiencing a lot of uncertainty right now, furlough, loss of jobs, not quite knowing how to do their job for the first time, lots of identity issues. Joe, I'm sure you're dealing with all of these, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
So now is a time that I think people are thinking about their own resilience. So I don't know, can you share screen, Keith, or have you not even got the option to share screen? Usually, I don't know if anyone's using Zoom quite a lot, but I usually get the option to share screen. But Keith and I today, we haven't found it. It's just, I wanted to show you a few definitions, but I can get my screen up and just read them out if we can't.
Yeah, I think you'll probably have to do that, Joe, because
or I can put my link and you can all look yourself.
Yes, yeah.
Maybe we could do that. That's what I do in my video conferences when there's nothing else that we can do. Hang on one second. My definitions. The problem with resilience, I will tell you, is that people say to me, Joe, define it.
Aye.
And I am, you probably had this, Joe, with stress. It's quite hard to define the word stress.
It is. Because it means different things to different people, doesn't it?
Exactly. And resilience too. Resilience is the other side of the coin. So I once did a workshop with Unilever years ago, where they asked me to do a workshop on well-being without saying the word stress.
Right.
My God, that was so hard. And when I was studying stress, my professor said, you watch how many times a day you use that word. So if you come from a resilience background, you're trying to turn it the other way. You're trying to always focus on your resilience or another person's resilience or the resilience of my teenage kid, you know, because that way you're always looking first at the good. You're always building, always looking to find something good and then build on it.
Yeah.
Whereas previously, and I was one of them, I was in work and well-being, we obsessed with focusing on the stress.
Right.
So this is a big factor of the whole world of resilience. It's kind of spinning it around. And people working in the field of coaching, mentoring, you know a lot about this because a lot of our work is dealing with stress.
Yeah.
And we know that it's the biggest absence, is due to stress. So it's hard not to talk about it. but resilience gives us a chance to try and reframe it and talk about it from a more positive standpoint.
Right.
Now, I'm going to get up some definitions. Hang on a second. There's the... Oh, thanks, Keith. You just copied
Keith,
that
yeah.
in.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat.
Oh, that's perfect. Resilience is not about toughing it out. Now, there's a very, very viewed TED talk that maybe you've seen, and it's by somebody called Angela Duckworth, and it's all about grit. Now, we hear a lot about personal grit. Now, it's useful to a point, but what it's doing, once again, is it's pushing everything back onto the individual, which we are doing too much. The individual needs resources. And if the individual has no resources, doesn't matter how much grit you've got,
Yeah.
you will not move forward.
Yeah. I think...
Go on, Joe.
Because I was going to say, Joe, I came across a book when I was in my education days around, I can't remember who the author is, called The Curse of the Strong. And I don't know if you read, and it's about that. The reality is you can tough it out, but inherently our limbic system can only take so much.
Exactly.
So, eventually at some point, if you don't kind of accept what's happening to you and you don't, take on the support. I think one of your definitions is about acknowledging when you need support.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ultimately, you'll hit that brick wall, won't you?
You will, because that's resistance.
Yes.
Not resilience.
Brilliant.
And if you Google, you can find all of this. Resistance versus resilience. And sometimes resistance is all we've got. Yeah. In some situations, it's the first bump. And then we can move forward into resilience. Yeah. But you're absolutely right. If somebody says to you, "Oh, Joe, you've got to be strong." Oh, it kind of fills you with a bit of like, oh no, can I? Yeah. Whereas resilience, I think, is a much more forgiving concept, because it's not just you. Yeah, you need to be able to access it. And for some of us, that is easier than others. Yeah. Either because we've got very supportive networks, very supportive family networks. If you're a freelancer, if you're an entrepreneur, you really need your networks, so that we can organize things like this, and share. So resilience does, even though personal resilience is something very important that you can build. If you look at this, it's not about being stoic. It's not about going it alone. It's not about a lot of those things that the sort of sometimes the US psychologists talk about. And it's not about perfection.
No.
I think today, especially with young people, they worry, especially young girls, about having to be perfect. And I think that's a pressure that society that puts on us, and it's knowing how to reach out, look for support. Storytelling, essential in resilience work. Now, telling stories, there's nothing more human, and depending upon who we're telling our story to, and it depends how we tell it. Also, our stories change over our lives. So a big part of resilience work, the best research that was done, was longitudinal research looking at people's resilience over decades.
Right.
It was actually done in Hawaii, bizarrely. It was 2 American researchers, and they went to, my perception of Hawaii is Paradise Island. But evidently, Hawaii has areas of social disadvantage, of immigrants, of whatever. So they went to this one island and did this longitudinal research. And Because the question was, 1/3 of children from terrible backgrounds come out okay, if not better. So this was why they started to ask, let's look at those resilient children and find out what it is they've got or what they've been able to access.
Mm-hmm.
Can you think about maybe what those children managed to access to make them build their resilience? Can you think what that could have been?
I'd say probably stories from their, past generations.
Stories from past generations, yeah.
Strength and support intergenerationally that builds resilience. It's positive affirmations, it's the positive messages, it's that input that they get, regardless of what material wealth they have or do not have. That's what helps to round that child. It has its basic needs met a little bit more than that as well.
Exactly. Very well said. Is that Sarah? I can't see people's names. Thanks, Sarah, for that. It is in one of my programs where I teach people about their own resilience that maybe we can look at a little bit today. It's exactly that. It's in some they call it the four S's. I'm not a big fan of all these things that put lists in there, but they can be useful. And one of them is a term that they call sagacity. I think they were just desperately trying to get an S, but it's a bit like what you were talking about. It's what we learn in life. It's a bit like those people that say, I went to the University of Life. Yeah. On their Facebook profile, yeah. That's because they've learned from their grandparents. They've learned from, that's because they're the people that they saw as resilient. So what those people said to them meant a lot to them. So yeah, it's that positive input that has to come from somewhere, Sarah, yeah. And where they find it. Where else do you think these children might find it?
From the community, from friends.
Yeah. Sometimes it could be a sports coach. My son is crazy about basketball. So when you see LeBron James programs to get the kids off the street, yeah. Because really, you just need one person to believe in you. Just one person. And that could be your grandparents. It could be a teacher. But as long as you get that can allow you to build your own. But nobody can exist alone.
Yeah.
Some people try and are quite good at it. But I think the introvert-extrovert thing has been quite interesting under lockdown. Because I think that the extroverts suffered a lot more than the introverts, yeah. But all these things are important. So coming out of the children research was important. Then it went into development and disasters. So in Latin America, it would be things like earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, how you rebuild the community or even your house. Yeah. So, and now resilience is beginning to come in to organizations. But I would say that a lot of it has been there. I mean, what would you say, Joe and Sarah, you work in this field. You can probably recognize a lot of, resilience in some of the best practices. What would you say?
I think organisations very much nowadays are certainly a lot more focused around well-being. I think some of the organisations I've worked at, if I'm honest, Joe, focus more on it's more about the health side of things necessarily, and I don't think, I'll be honest with you, I still don't think they pick up on the impact that stress and the environment that we're in, like how that can affect individuals. So I think organisations are getting there, but they're not quite there. If I'm honest, I don't think, from my experience.
Yeah, because it's been 16 years for me since I was working in the UK, but I was about to start again until coronavirus. She was going to come today, my partner in the UK, but actually she's got 6 phone calls with her employees. So I said to her, resilience, because she's got a training company. So obviously training companies are suffering massively. Yeah, nobody knows when people are going to be booking workshops.
Yep.
So I was about to start to fly over to the UK to give workshops.
Right.
With Becca, and she runs well-being. So what I would say is well-being and resilience walk hand in hand.
Hand in hand. Yeah.
And they sort of almost cross over. Some of the well-being models kind of almost are looking like, resilience. And what I would say is well-being is like the foundation, the good things like nutrition, sleep, exercise, alcohol, cigarettes, all those kind of things. But we all know that we need to do those things. Yeah. So, but what is it that actually makes us do them? Yeah, it's that final push. It's like, I smoke. I know it's terribly unhealthy to smoke, but I haven't stopped smoking, So it's this idea that we all know. And I think in quarantine, we've been bombarded. I don't know how you feel, folks, but I think we've been bombarded with advice, from nutrition to exercise, and it's hard to make sense of it. And it's overwhelming, I think. And I think that we start to feel it's that perfect thing starts to creep in. We can't be perfect, but we just have to be the best version of ourselves. And I think resilience is a bit kinder in that respect. It's not asking you to be a superhero, and that's what terrifies people. And if you're entrepreneurs, what you read every day about what you have to be, it's kind of exhausting.
Absolutely.
I don't know how the others feel. How do you feel about quite a lot of the things that I'm seeing during coronavirus about resilience are to do about what it's like working from home and working online. How did you all, for you guys, you probably do a lot of that anyway. Have you had many huge changes? What have been your big challenges?
Not really.
Sarah, you haven't had any big changes, really?
Well, yeah, other than, being based at home full time, because I flip between campuses and various other places.
Right.
I'm either on the road or I'm working from home or I'm working for an office. So it hasn't really made a huge difference to me in that sense. But what it has given me is lots of time to reflect on how I conduct myself and how I do business, and, what I might want to do moving forward. And
that's interesting. So you've had space to reflect. So that's been maybe a useful thing.
Yeah, being able just to check in with my own resilience as well as the that I work with. It's been an interesting little journey, actually.
I'm sure. I think for all of us, everyone's had their own experience, of how it's been. And now that we're beginning to come out of it, I think it is time for reflection, of how we feel, how we've changed, maybe. Anybody else? How do you feel that you coped? I mean, I listened to your video conference. So I heard a little bit about how you were coping.
I think if I'm honest, I think I've coped better than most, in the sense that what I found is that typically my business, I think I prefer the face-to-face through kind of the technology side now, actually, which is quite interesting.
It's hard, isn't it, not having human contact?
It is. So that's been really interesting. But I think, if I'm honest, I have up days and I have down days. I think I think there's days where I'm completely on point, very productive. Kind of pushing ahead too much, Jo, to be fair. And then
you think you're being a bit too hard on yourself?
I think and then obviously then comes the down days where it's like, sometimes I think I've realized that it's about pacing yourself, and I'm not a great pacer in life, so I'm kind of out there.
So maybe you've learned that.
Absolutely.
That to pace yourself and not be too hard on yourself.
Yeah,
I think we're all hard on ourselves. I have a friend who is an entrepreneur, and she's amazing, and I use her as my coach when I need it, because she's just amazing. And she says to me, God, if I talked to people how I talk to myself, and that's quite a good thing to do. Yeah. When you've got this internal dialogue with yourself, and you start to realize, wow, I'm being really mean to myself, and you kind of check yourself, and start to think, okay, Jo, let's try and have a better internal dialogue, because I'm just being too hard on myself all the time. And I think if you're an entrepreneur or somebody that works from home, a lot of us have been used to already that self-motivation, being aware of ourselves, being able to reflect. But I think for a lot of people, they're dealing with this for the first time, a lot of things. Mm-hmm. In the CIPD conference that I sat in on, they did have a woman talking about sleep.
Right.
How to get sleep. And it was quite interesting. But me, who's somebody who's used to going in after disasters, the last thing I would be doing is teaching people about sleep, But at the same time, I thought this is quite valuable. And maybe sometimes it's good to focus on those things like that you can try and, put some good practices. My son at the moment is terrible with his sleeping patterns. So for me, I was thinking as I was listening to it, I'll think about that for somebody else, But listening to the CIPD, what they're dealing with is with a whole bunch of people who are just not used to doing what a lot of entrepreneurs are already doing. Yeah. I think being an entrepreneur can be quite lonely. I don't know how you feel.
I think that's one of the things. I think that's one of the things that we're finding with our clients, because we have a training company which is starting to expand really quite quickly. A lot of our clients are large organisations, and it's the first time that a lot of them have ever worked from home.
Yeah.
So dealing with kids and spouses and partners. The network not being what they think it should be, because obviously they're trying to dial into a network that's within an organisation that's gone through their home broadband, which is causing all sorts of different problems. Excuse me. So for us, it's mainly listening and having a lot of empathy for them, because
active listening and empathy.
Without a doubt, because we do have offices, so for me, I worked from home for a long time and went into an office, and now I've had to come back home. So for me, I'm deciding whether I go back to the office or not, or do I carry on working from home, because I enjoyed so much.
So maybe that.
Yeah. So for me, I think it's having empathy with your clients. It's realizing that, I suppose Joe and I are very similar because we're both quick-paced people, and I've had to learn not to expect people to go at my pace, because they don't and they won't.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing is, what you can't do is you can't beat yourself up because you're not working at your normal pace.
Yeah.
Because they're not, and that's the problem. So when you hear all these idiots saying you should be working at 300 mile an hour, and if you're not working 24/7, you're useless, you're crap.
Oh, don't believe them. The people that say that, I don't believe them.
No, that's a short-term thing.
Yeah.
That's a short-term. I see lots of guys who are saying this in the late 40s and early 50s who look older than I do, because they're trying to live this lifestyle. And the unfortunate thing is, it's a very, very short burn. What most people don't realize is, when you're an entrepreneur, you don't just have one idea.
No.
You might have one idea that works at one particular time, but you have a million ideas, and all those ideas aren't going to be 999,000 of mine are absolute crap. The others might be half decent, and one might be a good one. But the thing is, that's what they don't realize. You've got to focus on what works for you, not what works for them.
Yeah.
So
you're very right there. It's really interesting, Keith, that you've said that. That's exactly how I've kind of felt over this period. So I think it's interesting from a resilience point of view, that the resilience, for my resilience, is as well as around, as you say, not being so hard and recognizing that I've got loads of ideas, but not all of them are going to come to fruition, kind of thing. So just cut myself some slack, and just I suppose to just do what I can do in the time that I've got, in some sense.
Well, Joe, you probably have done psychometrics and personality tests.
Yeah.
Well, I'm an ENFP classic.
Oh, right.
Any of the others, I don't know if you've done, Rosemary, I don't know if you know about the psychometrics, but it's something that a psychologist, it's like doing your horoscope, and now you can do them online, But the first famous one was the Myers-Briggs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you've probably heard of it. And it's all Freud psychology, and I like them. I actually find them useful for training and development, not so much for recruitment, which they do get used for, because people like doing them and they like talking about them. So my personality is that I'm an extrovert. But it's also, but psychometrics, it's you talking about yourself. So I have put people to do psychometrics, and the person that comes out is unrecognizable. And that's because they're not very self-aware, or they're trying to be someone that they're not. Yeah. So the whole point of psychometrics is that you've got to be honest. And then you can look at, and really, I wanted today to show you the mandala. Anyway, go and have a look at my webpage after, because I can't share the screen. The mandala is there. Now, there's lots of models you can use on resilience, but I quite like the mandala because it's not a list. It goes round, there's 7 pillars, and I sit there and I always only remember 6 on top of my head. And what I like about the mandala is that depending upon how you're feeling and what's going on, depends upon what resilience you need to build. I'll give you one example. Another thing that I love about resilience is that sense of humor is a big, important piece. Now, for me, this was the first time in any of my psychology studies I'd seen sense of humor so there. And I thought, hallelujah, at last, how do we get by without sense of humor? How important is sense of humor to your own resilience, especially if you're bloody British, yeah? I mean, we're famous for our sense of humor getting us through. So for me, that's another aspect that I love, about resilience. And we even say things like, I've had a sense of humor failure. At that point, we know, oh God, Joe, come on, laugh at life and laugh at yourself normally. hello, David. Thanks for joining us. We're just chatting generally about what resilience is and how it fits into our lives. So maybe you can pick up here a little bit. And there's a few things in the text box maybe that you can read to sort of catch up a bit. Anyway, what was I talking about? I've forgotten now.
After.
Sense of humour.
Sense of humour. So, how much sense of humour have we seen during this crisis?
I think quite a lot, actually, in the sense of people taking the mick out. I have never, I haven't resorted to TikTok just yet. But I've seen a lot of my friends. The frightening thing is, I've seen a lot of my friends on there.
I don't know what that is.
What is that? God, Joe, you'll have to have a look.
Rosemary's laughing there.
People posting videos, funny videos. So it's, you know, and I think, you know what? I think the really beautiful thing about this is, even, can I say this? Even though there's, you know, the horror and the fear, right, of what's gone on around this pandemic, right, even at our lowest, right, even at our lowest, you can crack a joke. And I think, you know, I think that's coping mechanisms, isn't it? In
Absolutely.
some sense. Yeah.
And I think in organizations and generally the modern psychology has desperately left sense of humor out. So for me, that was another way when I saw that sense of humor is a big slice of the resilience mandala. Yeah. Because honestly, humor has got me through the traumas in my life like I can't tell you. Humor and dancing and music. You see, this is the other thing about the mindfulness. A lot of people are feeling pressure because they can't meditate. Yeah. Now, I try and take that pressure off people. And I say, you do, but you have your own way. Mindfulness doesn't have to be sitting in a room with a bunch of strangers on a plastic mat. It can be staring at the tree opposite your office. It can be swimming. It can be little children, animals make you mindful. This idea that mindfulness has to come from repackaged and whatever. No, we've been doing mindfulness for years. Rosemary does loads of mindfulness in her garden and with her cricket. You're very mindful. What I try to say to people is mindfulness is important, but you've already probably got it in your life.
Yeah.
Just register that and value it more and know the place that you go to be mindful. For me right now, I'm desperately missing my 40 lengths of swimming a day.
Right.
Because that is when I switch off. My brain stops going, you know. And I'm sure maybe Keith, I don't know if you've missed doing some exercise.
No, I still do exercise.
You still manage. You've been one of the lucky ones.
We're quite lucky because we have lots of places we can walk straight from the house. So no, I have to say, other than the kids and the grandkids, they're the things that we miss the most.
Right. Not seeing them.
Yeah, without a doubt. And just being able to see people and stop and chat properly.
You see, you can put that straight into resilience. That's connections. That's your good connections. Yeah. They've been rocked a little bit, yeah. And so when you can get those back, that'll be a lovely moment, yeah, when you start to see all your family and your grandchildren, yeah. I'm sure you're doing the family Zooms and whatever, but I think the younger kids are not so good on the Zoom, yeah. They don't really get it, so it's not always so easy. But I think what comes out of these sort of crisis times are good things. I mean, you've all mentioned some things that have been good. Reflection, realizing and acknowledging that you're being hard on yourself. Yeah. You, Keith, realizing that you go really fast and you've got to slow down a bit and help the other people.
Yeah.
And I think all these things, you can just pop into that little, resilience thing all day. And that's what's great that's really good about it. Now, I was going to read out some of the definitions to play around with before we finish, but I just went to copy and paste and it wouldn't do it. Hang on a second. Let me just try again. Maybe I'll do them one by one. Maybe it was too much. Now, these all come from people that I actually know, that I met when I was studying. Because I studied resilience in Spanish. So culturally, I studied it in a different place. But when I'd finished, I'm a researcher constantly. That's just like part of my identity. I can't stop. I went off to look about what was being done in resilience in different parts of the world. Australia, Joe and Sarah, I'll tell you that Australia has a lot of good stuff going on. The Resilience Project. Also New Zealand does too. I found Canada, I found a great guy called Michael Ungar, who is my favorite. He comes from a social work background, which, you know, that's another area where resilience has been for a long time. The front line of social work. Yeah, that's where you're really seeing some social adversities. Now, in organizations or business, there's another aspect of resilience that we talk about, which is almost like your insurance. Yeah. One American woman that I found, she talks about it as there's the resilience like your status quo, yeah, which is a bit like stay calm and carry on. And then there is the resilience when you've had a huge trauma, yeah, or maybe the world has, like we're having now, yeah. And that is when you get through an adversity, and the idea is that you grow, yeah, and you come through it well. Let me just see if I can put now. No, I can't put into the message box now. Never mind. I'm going to read them. Boris Cyrulnik is French. He is like the godfather of European resilience, if you like. He's in his 80s now. I did meet him at a conference in Barcelona, but he was surrounded by fans. I couldn't get close to him. But he's written like 20 books. Not sure how much is available in English, but I really like a lot of the definitions. They talk about weaving, another metaphor. Yeah. So you as the person, you are one thread, and we all weave to make a resilient community, a resilient organization, a resilient network. And it's this metaphor of weaving, which is used quite a lot. Yeah. Other metaphors of resilience is the phoenix, rising from the ashes. Some people don't like that one, but also in holistic resilience, we talk a lot about spirals, and it's all gets, you can get sort of into quantum physics. When I did my holistic resilience, it's kind of blows your mind a bit, but it's good, it's fun. So really what I'm trying to say is that, you know, resilience, once you start to recognize it, you see it everywhere. Can you give me a song that's about resilience? I bet all your favorite songs are about resilience. Think about one of your favorite songs, because basically pop songs are generally about love or resilience, I would say.
Oh, it's the old classic, isn't there? Gloria Gaynor.
I will say that. That's the classic. Yeah, that's the one. And don't we love that when we're in a bad mood? Don't we love putting that song on and screaming it out? Yeah.
Is that your secret dance floor song there, Sarah, coming out?
You know me well, Joe.
Another one I posted. I've got a Facebook page, Creative Resilience. So go and have a look at my website and my Facebook page, because I post things, and I'd love it if people posted too. And so I was posting songs for resilience, and a classic one is "Don't Give Up." Peter Gabriel and Kate Bush.
All right.
And that one works really well because everybody was in love with Peter Gabriel or Kate Bush when we were all younger, I think. And they stand hugging each other the whole video, and it's kind of sweet. But so many songs, country and western, my God, they're all about resilience, yeah? Rappers, a lot of like social, you know, problems that rappers talk about. What other, I mean, really, once you start to think about films, and this goes back to the stories, because we like to listen to stories about resilience. Otherwise, there really isn't a story. Now, I'm going to give you a silly personal example. My mum, all excited, writes to me the other day saying that my cousin's son is going to go to Cambridge. Now, I'm not that impressed because both his parents went to Cambridge, both his grandparents went to Cambridge. He's been to every school to get him to get into Cambridge. There's no story, yeah. There's really no story there. Now, if somebody had told me that my friend in wherever, in Guatemala's son had applied to a scholarship and got into Cambridge, now I would be jumping up and down. Yeah. I would be going, oh my God, what a story of resilience. Now, my cousin's kids getting into Cambridge, for me, that's just like, oh God, how boring. I wish they'd rebelled and done something different. But of course, our stories, that's what we like. We like to hear of people getting through adversity. How many films have you watched during coronavirus? Forrest Gump. We sat and watched Forrest Gump, and I've forgotten how brilliant that film was. Yeah, those are the films that we like to see because they show people getting through things, and we can relate to that. Yeah, it makes them human. Somebody asked me, when somebody was pressuring me the other day to give a definition, I mean, you can go to my website and have a look at a few more definitions. I was saying, well, it's not the definition that's important, because it's really, you can make your own definition. And every time I do a workshop on, you know, resilience, I hear another definition that I like, that somebody's got for themselves. And I go, wow, that's a good one. Woo, you know. And so that's what I mean. It's a dynamic interaction between you and your world. And yeah, we want to present the best side of ourselves. But also, when I did the year's course of promoting, you know, resilience, the toughest was the family, personally, because it set me back into my family growing up. And also it made me think of myself as a mother. So I'm sure, looking at you today, I know you've got different roles in your family. Being a grandparent, as you know, Rosemary and Keith, is very different from being a parent.
It is.
But a grandparent's role is invaluable. Yeah, and as Sarah said, like sometimes the stories that you hear from your grandparents are the things that stay with you. Yeah, quite often people talk about, oh, my grandfather said this. If I ask people to think about a resilient person in their life, who would you nominate? Who would you say is your example in your life personally?
For me personally, my granddad on my mum's side.
Right.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Why was that, Rosemary? What was it about him?
I think because where they lived in Bolton, it was quite a poor area, and my granddad he actually didn't stop working until he was about 75, but he brought up my mum and her brother. They were mill workers. I mean, I've got photographs. How on earth they worked in those places, I don't know. just to make sure that there was food on the table and what have you. And he was a very big part of our childhood.
And a good influence, yeah.
Yeah, and they lived in a mill town. But then when I was a little girl, my dad was a builder, so we actually lived in a nice place in the country. And me and my granddad used to walk for miles through the hills because it was something he never really had the opportunity to do. And I remember that. It gave me, from being 6 years old probably, a love of nature.
And you probably talked a lot on those walks, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we talked about all sorts of things. And quite often he would sneak a pasty. He would have a pasty in his pocket, and as we're walking, we'd share a pasty. Don't tell your mum, because when you go back, you've got to have your dinner. And I'd go back and I'd had half of this massive pasty.
Oh, I could murder a pasty right now.
Just silly little things like that. But I think he did give me a lot of interest in the nature and the animals, and
a lot of things that have been in your resilience, in your life.
It is. It's when you think back, and it does make you wonder: is that where it came from? I don't know, but no.
I think.
Sorry, guys. I am really sorry, but we've, as much as I would love to carry on, we've run out of time.
Oh, yeah, we're getting kicked out. Guys, if you want to, I just want to leave you. I don't know why I can't type into the box, but hey, technologies. I can send you places to go, and if you want to read more, I can send you a few more links.
Probably the easiest thing to do, Joe, would be to put it into
on
the
the
group.
Facebook. Yeah,
shove it in the Facebook group
page. Here in just to finish off quickly, my go-to place in the UK is the Resilience Centre in Brighton University. It's a great resource, and also during coronavirus, I can attend their webinars. I couldn't because I'm usually in Brighton and places. In Spain, there are a few people. I've got all my work is in a place, but half of it is in Spanish. I'm going to have to start translating it. But I have written one about resilience in English. But anyway, I'll put a few links out.
Real.
But basically, if you start to Google, you'll find out a lot of stuff. But check in with me, because there are a lot of people that talk about resilience and they haven't got the full picture. So it becomes a little bit dangerous, because it's this idea of like, you've got to be resilient no matter what comes your way. And it reduces it to just like, you've got to be strong and gritty, and it's much more than that. Yeah.
No, that's brilliant.
Okay, well,
that's great, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I'll put a few things up to share a bit more, so if you find out a little bit more. But just really today, I just wanted to get you excited about the concept and a bit more curious. Yeah.
I think you have.
It's been fun. Thank you, guys. I'm going to
Thank you.
Take care, guys, and thanks very much.
Take care.